Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the final divisional preview. Today is the AFC West, and we saved this one for last because it's got the defending Super Bowl champions, the two-time defending champions. Can they get a three-peat? Well, we're going to discuss about that in a bit. But I got to ask you, a lot of turnover in this division. One of the premier coaches in college football coming back to the NFL. You have some new quarterbacks, and then you have the Chiefs. Is this division got a breath of new life, or do you think maybe we're going to have to wait a bit before we see someone challenge the Chiefs straight away?
I don't think anybody's challenging the Chiefs this year. Maybe the Raiders. If you remember last year, the Raiders did surprise them. But I don't think anybody's there to challenge them for the division this year. We'll have to see how how quickly the Chargers can put things together. Denver seems to be pretty positive with their new acquisitions. Personally, I think that they're a little bit away, but I also said the same thing about the Houston Texans last year, and I might have been slightly wrong about that. So, it's funny because we do all this work to try to make sure that we have all the draft and all the free agents and the losses and talk about where they were last year and how we think everybody will fit in. But there's a level of coaching, especially with new coaches, and there's a level of players either learning what they didn't know before that we sitting behind a computer will never know until we're actually watching the game. So we've been wrong before, we'll be wrong again, but we like to think we're right more than we're wrong. Yep. And I don't think anybody's challenging the Chiefs this year.
Well, let's get straight into it, and we're starting with the last place team this past year. And I think the Chargers had a lot of good this offseason, kind of restructuring the team, getting rid of some older guys that you just kind of have to move off of when you look at how far this team is away. But I gotta ask, how do you feel about them moving off some of their bigger pieces in Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and keeping guys like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa? Are those long-term guys, or are they just kind of, hey, we'll keep them here this year and see what we can get maybe at the deadline or next offseason?
Well, I think that you have to do this incrementally, right? Because you still need players. And their offensive strategy is going to be changing enough to where Mike Williams, often injury plagued. So when he's on the field, he's pretty special to watch, but there's no allegiance with this new coaching staff. So let's get rid of him and let's try to build. Keenan Allen, strictly monetary. I mean, as for a new coaching staff, do you want somebody that can come in here and be your ace when your quarterback needs a bailout or something else? Absolutely. But due to some of the contract structures that the Chargers have had in the past, it's not feasible because he had to go or the defense had to go. And Harbaugh is a defensive-minded coach, so obviously he's going to kind of lean towards that way. I think the biggest acquisition or the most important acquisition for them is a new coach, right? We spoke about this last year going into the season that I felt last year that they should have had a brand new coaching staff last year. And sadly, I think that they wasted an opportunity last year because they had a good roster. They just didn't have the chef that could, cook the meal the right way. And so they had to make a lot of changes in the offseason because of that. And that's the sad part.
See, and we can say Staley was good or bad, and he had his faults. I will still defend him to an extent because when I went back and looked over this team, I do not think it was properly constructed under Tom Telesco, which is why I think Tom Telesco was fired. They put way too much faith in guys with injury issues getting big-time contracts. And I think Harbaugh is cleaning that up. As we just stated, Williams and Keenan Allen are gone. Do I think Mack and Bosa are going to be on this team when they make the playoffs next? Maybe one of them and Joey Bosa, but Khalil Mack will be gone. They are still undergoing a major overhaul. I don't expect this team to be challenging for the playoffs. I especially don't expect them to be challenging Chiefs for division. But they're taking steps in the right direction. A big issue with the Chargers has been keeping Justin Herbert healthy. Well, they maybe now have the best tackle duo in the league, and maybe that's putting a lot of pressure on Joe Alt. That's how highly I think of him. But you got Alt and Slater. Phenomenal tackles. They need to improve their interior O-line a bit still. They need to get more receiving depth. And
a lot more receiving depth.
Yeah, a lot. And mainly, this team is going to focus on running the football, bringing Greg Roman. I don't know how many passing yards Herbert's going to have. I wouldn't be shocked if he had for a full season healthy, he had a career low of yards and touchdowns. That's just because Greg Roman will want to run the football. They brought in J.K. Dobbins, they brought in Gus Edwards, and they drafted your guy, Vidal, out of Troy, to come in and fill in that role. They lost Austin Eckler, but does he fit the system better than these guys? I don't think so.
So interesting that you're bringing that up real quick before we jump into the draft. So last year, the Chargers had 4,312 passing yards and 1,642 rushing yards. So out of that 4,312 passing yards, how many of those yards do you think are no longer on the team?
Are we talking receiving or passing? Because
receiving.
Williams.
How many of those 4,300 yards are no longer on the team for the people that caught the ball?
I guess around 3,500.
2,600.
35. Okay.
Okay. On the 1,642 rushing yards, how many rushing yards do you think are no longer there?
I would guess only Herbert's yards because they just did cut some of their backs they had last year on the roster cuts today.
So they've lost 1,000 yards from the rushers from last year. So your offense is starting just kind of like to go with what you said. You don't know where the yards are going to come from this year. They did bring in Gus Edwards and they brought in J.K. Dobbins, and so we'll see what they can do if they can stay healthy. We've both thought they're great running backs. They just have had a trouble staying healthy. So, but it's very interesting when you actually look about where their production was last year. You have out of almost 6,000 yards, you have over half of them are no longer on the team.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with what we've been saying is this is a major roster turnover right now.
Oh, definitely.
But as you have stated, it's time we jump into their draft. And I really like this draft. I think it was one of the better drafts in the NFL this year. Mainly because their first pick, I believe, was a true home run, Joe Alt. There was not a better offensive lineman in this class. And he is probably a 12, 15-year vet as long as he stays healthy at minimum. Has a chance to have a gold jacket with just the sheer technique and traits he has.
Let's pump the brakes a little bit. There isn't a better prospect.
Yeah, but I'm also trying to say he would be the least shocking guy to me if everything turned out, and that's including Marvin and Caleb, because he plays a sturdy position. He's going to a coach that loves to run the football, that respects his offensive line. I think it's a perfect fit.
No, I'm not going to argue with you. I just, once again, we don't want to put too much pressure on these guys, but he is a great prospect for them. Second round pick, one of my favorite players in this draft, Ladd McConkey. I don't think he was utilized the proper way in Georgia, and I think he is going to be something special. Do I think he's the player that Justin Jefferson was? No. But if you remember how when he was coming out, and people were taking above him, and I was like, nope, Jefferson's going to be the guy. I feel strongly that McConkey is going to be that receiver that everybody was like, oh, he was okay in college, but oh my goodness, what he's going to do in the pros is going to just wow.
I would agree that Ladd's going to probably break out more than people would expect. He is probably going to be their number one wide receiver because Quentin Johnston, I don't really have much hope there. And Ladd will be the guy. At the very least, he's going to be the reliable third down target for Justin Herbert, which is something you desperately need after moving off of Keenan Allen.
Absolutely.
Their next pick after that was a guy Harbaugh is very familiar with in Junior Colson. Colson comes from Michigan. I'm sure Harbaugh loves that, knows him already. He is going to pretty much be in the exact same defensive scheme, if I'm correct. Like, this is going to be a perfect match because they know what he is already. He's very good at playing the run. He's very good in pass defense. I wouldn't say he's elite in either or, but he knows the system already. He is probably going to know the system better than most of the vets on this team just because he's been playing in it for the past couple seasons already, and he is coming in with his coach, with his DC. That's just a huge advantage that not many players get in the NFL.
Well, it'll be interesting. I mean, there are probably some variation for the defensive structure, but yeah, right. I mean, Harbaugh knows him, and so we both think that this is going to be a really good player moving forward for them.
Justin Eboudier from Alabama. He's an Alabama defensive tackle. Good against the run. Maybe doesn't have the pass rushing skills you would hope for in a defensive tackle just so you can imply interior pressure. But he's good against the run, and he will be very versatile for them in run packages.
So I don't know much about him. He's not one that I actually, for a third round pick or a fourth round pick, I guess I didn't do my due diligence. But is he going to play zero technique or?
That would be my guess. And another thing to keep track of, he did play against Harbaugh in the college football playoffs this past year, so Harbaugh had an up-close look at him.
Fair enough. Tari Still, cornerback out of Maryland. It's really weird. Other than there's a couple players in this draft that I just don't know. I don't recall. So, and he's not one that I actually followed. And once again, I've already said, through a couple of these breakouts that I didn't pay very much attention to cornerbacks simply because I didn't think Seattle was going to take one, let alone two.
So, ironically, I think Still's best game was against Michigan, which I'm sure very much helped his case. That Maryland defense played way over their head in that game and still had a very good one. He was kind of moving around. He really didn't have a set guy. It was more or less who was on his side of the field. He had a good job covering everyone all day long. Decent in the run. I think it's a good pick. And, hey, apparently if you had a good game against Michigan, Harbaugh liked you. Cam Hart from Notre Dame, I assume because he's another corner you didn't watch too much of?
No, I saw a little bit of him. To be quite honest, since I didn't do much rankings for cornerbacks, I don't know where he would sit, but I wasn't that impressed with him at Notre Dame. So I'll let you do more of the talking about it.
I would agree. I feel like this was kind of a major overdraft because I didn't have a draftable grade on him. I didn't think he was worth it.
Yeah. My guy.
Kamani Vidal, which, I mean, take a guy in the 6th round. I will never complain about that for a running back. You were much higher on him than I was. And not saying I don't like Vidal. I just think you loved him a bunch more.
He is a football player. He is just smash mouth football player. I love how he plays the game. And yeah, he came from Troy. So is that going to transition to the NFL? We'll know soon, but I just love that guy. I could watch highlights from him a lot just because I thought the way he did things, the way he played the game, he was special.
Yep. Brennan Rice from USC, son of Jerry Rice. I really don't have a strong opinion on him. He was a guy I think would have been an undrafted free agent. Probably drafted him so they didn't have to worry about anyone else signing him, would be my guess.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Cornelius Johnson, again, a guy I just didn't watch a whole bunch of, but from Michigan, so Harbaugh is very, very familiar with him.
He from everything that I heard, like I listened on podcasts and everything else, I think he's going to be more along the lines of a special teams guy.
That makes sense. So we look at this Chargers team, and I think it's very clear this is a, not right now, but 2 years down the line, there's a chance this is a legit contender.
Yeah, they just have to fix the roster, a little bit more. But they brought in a lot of pieces that indicate that they're moving in the right direction.
Which is very crucial in a big-time rebuild like this.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have any more losses to add, or do you think we covered them all?
No, I mean, they did bring in a lot of free agents, but they had to because they did jettison a lot of things. You figure your losses: Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Gerald Everett, Austin Eckler, and Kenneth Murray. It's a lot of offense that you have to make up for. But I think Dobbins and Edwards, if you can keep them healthy, they're a way to go. I really like Ladd McConkey. So let's face it. I already said that I don't think that they're going to be competing this year. But even if they have the same amount of wins that they had last year, I think they'll be better wins, if that makes any sense.
And that makes 100% sense. Now it's time to move on to the team that finished second last in the Denver Broncos. And we're going to talk about a certain player that Broncos fans are really excited about here in a minute. I couldn't find too many overly positive things to say about this team when I looked over it. So I'm just going to pick out their best player and just say Pat Surtain is what best cornerback? Top 5, top 3?
Definitely. Definitely.
Now, and to get into this team overall, I just feel there's so many holes in this roster. The line, I'm not a big fan of. The receiving room, I like Courtland Sutton, but they just cut Tim Patrick. The running back room, Javonte Williams, great. Has had some knee injury issues. That concerns me majorly. Quarterback, rookie quarterback, I'm going to save it for the draft recap of my thoughts on Bo. Defensively, I like Pat Surtain. Maybe Baron Browning. That's kind of it. I really just don't care for this team overall, how it's structured.
And they're going to a new coaching philosophy as well. So,
yeah, it's when I look at the Broncos, I see this team's either going to majorly surprise me or I'm going to be spot on, dead right, and they're going to be bad. There's going to be no in between here. Because maybe I'm overlooking this defense and they're going to be much better than I think. Or they're going to struggle, which is what I'm leaning towards at this moment. Now, on the positives, more positives, they had a fine draft. Nothing I really took away. There were 2 picks I very much did not like. I was not a big Bo Nix guy, to say the very least. I thought he was a guy who will excel in college, did his stuff right, but is not going to excel in the NFL because he's not a throwing guys open type quarterback. He's a spot thrower. And as we saw in the preseason, he played very, very well in the preseason. The problem is that's a lot of spot throws, not movement
Well, it's
throws.
because it's vanilla coverage.
And that's another thing. We cannot put too much stock in his preseason. Now, the next pick, Jonah Ellis, someone I really liked a bunch. I think he has very good handwork. He has some good bend. He's got some talent and tools there that I really like that I think he can develop into an NFL starting edge. Troy Franklin, I was really low on. That's strictly because I did not think he could beat a press man corner to save his life whenever I watched his film. Because it didn't happen at all. He got pressed the line, got knocked off it completely. Then you look at Chris Abrams-Drainier. Very good player. very much like this for fifth round. Missouri had a very chippy defense, if that makes sense. They weren't the elites of talent, but they would come down, they'd play the run, they were good in coverage, they could make their plays. Just not fun guys to play against. Audric Estime, a guy I really, really loved. Not fast, not going to blow you away with his speed, but he's going to run through you. When he lowers his shoulder and hits you, you're going to know. Devon Vele. Vele, I actually had a much higher grade on than Troy Franklin. I think he's very talented. I think he's shown that from everything I've read. He was phenomenal in training camp. Had a solid preseason from what I did watch. I very much have high expectations for him, and I do believe he made the team today. In Nick Gargilo from South Carolina, didn't watch anything on him, so I can't really give you a yes or no on him. But what do you think about this draft?
I'm going to preface this by saying that I'm not a Denver Broncos fan to begin with. Okay? But kind of like how you prefaced before, this team has a lot of holes. And a rookie quarterback isn't going to fill those holes, right? He's not enough. I don't care what rookie quarterback you got. He wasn't going to be enough to make this roster competitive, right? I would have leveraged that draft pick that they had to try to trade down, get more draft picks because they didn't have a second. They need players, and they need good players. And so I think that they should have foregone the quarterback this year and tried to build a team first. Because you really, you have Sutton. Other than that, you really don't have much. Javonte, he's been hurt a lot. Your line might be a little suspect. Got a really good tight end. And your defense is kind of getting revamped as well. And so I just think that they really should have tried to acquire more picks for more players.
It truly feels like there is pressure, maybe up top from ownership. Maybe Sean Payton just really loved Bo Nix. It felt like there was some added pressure to try and get a quarterback after the Russell Wilson disaster, which it was. It was straight up a disaster when you pay a quarterback that much money, then you have to incur the dead cap, and he signs for free pretty much to another team. You have to have something to fall back on, and maybe ownership kind of pressured the situation to be like, hey, we need a quarterback, we need to sell tickets, we need to find a way to get this team going again. And Sean Payton saw Bo Nix, said, he reminds me of some guys I've worked with, maybe I can get him to work.
Well, everybody sits there and talks about how they're likening Nix to the smarts of Drew Brees and the physical ability of Taysom Hill. And I think we're just reaching here just to say, hey, look, this is a quarterback that he's going to be able to work with. We don't know. We'll see. But early forecasting is that neither one of us really think they're going anywhere this year.
No, and maybe that's better for the Broncos in the long run because they need to draft some elite talents. This is going to be a very defensive draft, it looks like, coming up, loaded with a bunch of edges. Denver needs a premier edge. So maybe having a really bad season this year isn't the worst thing in the world, considering you do need an edge to put pressure on Pat Mahomes and Justin Herbert.
Yeah, now that being said, just because I said that, they're going to end up beating the Seahawks game 1.
Well, with your luck, that's very possible. Although, Bo Nix has a losing record against Washington teams, so. And teams from Seattle specifically. And Ryan Grubb's run offenses.
All righty, that's good.
Let's move on to the Raiders, because I don't want to be too negative.
No, definitely. It's just how we see it, sadly.
The Raiders, I think they had a really good coaching move and then a really stupid one. The positive is Mark Davis didn't overthink this. He didn't go fishing for the big name. He went with the guy the players fell in love with. He brought them closer. Antonio Pierce is the right call. I'm very happy he did that. Now we look at the other coaching decision, and that's hiring Luke Getsy to be the offense coordinator. I did not have anything positive to say about the Bears offense last year, pretty much. And maybe you can put that a lot on Justin Fields in the offensive line, but play calling was just so abysmal. There was a philosophy there in, hey, maybe it does make sense on paper of when you want to call these things, but they were not designed properly. They were not executed properly. The players were not put in the right position to succeed. And that's my big-time concern with the Raiders. If their offense coordinator cannot put them in position to succeed, that defense will eventually tire out and they will lose a bunch of games.
Well, that's fair, but we also have to understand that sometimes players aren't for a scheme, right? And I always say that you need to coach for your players and not for your coaching philosophy. But maybe, and we don't know this, we'll see a lot more this year about how the Bears do. New coaching, new offensive coordinator, new coach. For the most part, same offensive line, a couple other changes. But it'll be interesting to see how he does in a new environment. We say this all the time about players. Sometimes it's a matter of a new environment, right? You can be apprehensive, but the Raiders saw something, and so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people don't like their quarterback situation. I'm not going to say and pretend it's good, but Gardner Minshew is serviceable. Is he great? No. But he can make sure you don't lose football games, as we saw with the Colts. I'm not saying this team is going to be great offensively. In fact, quite the opposite. But it will be fun to watch Gardner Minshew have those F it Devontae down there somewhere.
Well, Minshew is, this generation's version of Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? A lot of moxie, goes out there, and he makes some really, really good plays. And then he has some really, really what were you thinking plays. And that's what's going to be important, is because last year, when we were at was when the Raiders made that push towards the end of the season, they had completely changed their offensive identity. And so are they going to be able to maintain that, which was, protecting the football?
And to your point more, Gardner, when he does go in that gunslinger mode, I don't know if I've ever seen a quarterback have as much faith in his arm as Gardner Minshew since Brett Favre. Those throws, he will try to make them, and they will lead to turnovers. The Raiders are not going to be a turnover-positive team, in my opinion, with Gardner Minshew as quarterback. Now, that's not saying they won't win football games, because I think he gives them the best chance to score touchdowns than like Aiden O'Connell or anyone else they have on that roster. But you clearly see he's not the long-term answer. They will be looking to draft a guy. Maybe not this year, maybe the year after that. I believe Gardner has a 2-year contract, which most deals are anyways, just 2-year deals, how guarantees are structured. But he mainly has a 2-year contract. Maybe they're going to draft guys, have him sit behind Gardner next April, or it's Gardner's show for the next 2 years. But to go to more positives, their draft was really good. Brock Bowers was a very hyped up prospect for many, many years. It was hard not to like him. Now, can you argue he was maybe not as far distant as other tight end prospects in this past draft? Absolutely. But Brock Bowers is very talented. He's very good at receiving the ball. Not the best blocker, but in today's modern NFL, they will use him in the right spots. But my question is, what do you do with Mayer? Is this going to set up a lot of 2 tight end sets now? Which I don't remember how many times we saw that with the Bears last year. but they did have 2 tight ends in Robert Tonyan and Cole Kmet that did play a bit. So maybe we see something like that of where maybe they rotate. Maybe Brock Bowers goes out to be a big slot. Just find a way to get their best 11 on the field, which Mayer and Bowers will factor into majorly.
Yeah, well, they did do a lot of they did do a lot of 2 tight end formations.
Their second pick was Jackson Powers Johnson, a guy I really loved a bunch. Big, physical, nasty guy. Maybe not the quickest, but man, he's fun to watch hit people. Now,
well, and with their run game last year, if they're gonna try to just continue to smash the ball down everybody's throat, he's the perfect linchpin to do that, right? Because he is great at just, overpowering guys, right? Because that's what he does. He's great just going forward. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it was a good pick for them in the second round. It gives them a lot of attitude on their offensive line.
Yep. I believe there were only 2 teams that drafted guys that I had top 10 in this draft, and I mean 2 players. The Bears, who got Caleb Ndunze, and the Raiders, who got Bowers and JPJ. I love them both. I actually probably in the long run would have preferred to get JPJ over Bowers just because the offensive line position, getting that solidified is always great. He will be playing guard for them, but he did play guard at Oregon as well. It's not like he's only played center at Oregon, he's got to move to guard. No, he played guard there as well. Their next pick was DJ Glaze, an offensive tackle on Maryland. I didn't watch a whole bunch of him just because he just never really intrigued me. I never felt strongly about him one way or another. So I can't say if this is fair value or not because I just didn't watch enough to make a fair assumption.
What about Richardson, the cornerback out of Mississippi State?
He played on Mississippi State.
Okay.
And I don't know how good of a compliment that is with how Mississippi State played last year. I mean, Richardson, I don't want to hamper him too much because there was a lot of turmoil with Mississippi State. Having their defensive coordinator step up last year with what happened in the offseason prior, it can affect those players a lot longer than it would an NFL team. So I don't really have a strong assumption on him. He played cornerback in Mississippi State. I didn't watch a whole bunch of him. He just never intrigued me. Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State. I liked him a bunch. I think he's very good at playing the run. I think he is a good downhill ball player. Don't really like him coming back and playing pass D, but if you just have him run downhill, I think he'll fill in run gaps, will get to the quarterback, get to use some sacks. Very good player. Dylan LeBeau, I honestly did not watch. Running back at New Hampshire.
Watch New Hampshire? Really? I'm shocked.
I did watch New Hampshire. That was because I was intrigued about Minnesota's new starting quarterback, college football to be exact. And the one thing I will say, he did have to be in the short passing game a bunch. That's what I will say about LeBeau. Trey Taylor, the safety out of Air Force. This was one of your guys, wasn't he?
Yes. Yep. I honestly, because I did look at safeties, and he is a physical specimen. In the 7th round, I guess I don't know if he made the roster or not, but I think that he can make something of himself. I loved him. I love watching him hit, and so I'm scrolling through real quick as I'm talking. He made the team.
Look at that. That is good.
Yeah.
Now, while you're scrolling, did MJ Devonshire make the team?
Cornerback out of Pitt.
Yes, he is going to be a nickel guy. I don't know if he made the team exactly. I know a bunch of.
He's not showing on the cut list on NFL roster cuts.
So as we stand right now, he has made the 53. And as I was saying, he is a nickel guy. I would not put him outside corner because I think he would get the pants, to be completely honest. but he's a guy that can maybe develop into a starting nickel. And this is around the point where you see some guys go that play nickel and are in the league for a long time because their position just kind of just falls down more and more, and they get drafted around here.
So we talked about, JPJ bringing an attitude of, a lot of power, a lot of attitude to the offensive line. Their free agent, one of their free agent, probably their main free agent acquisition, as far as I'm concerned, you could say does the exact same thing on the defensive line, and that's Christian Wilkins.
What a pairing Wilkins and Crosby will be. And if Tyree Wilson can get to the point we really thought he could be, that is going to be a quarterback's nightmare.
Yeah, their defensive line can be special. Right now, you got Crosby, John Jenkins, Christian Wilkins, and then Malcolm Kuntz. And Malcolm Kuntz has played pretty solidly as well. So I think that it's going to be interesting. Their defensive line is definitely better than it was last year. I really I like their defense. I really do. I think their defense can be a lot better than what everybody thinks. So
I like their defense as well. Just my only concern is they're going to be a team that's going to be put in some bad positions just from some gambler type throws from Gardner Minshew,
which we talked about, right? So,
the talent is there though.
Yeah, no, they've got a lot of talent, and their secondary last year. You think about after, Pierce took over, their secondary and the rest of their defense played lights out. So they had one of the best secondaries the second half of the season last year. So it'll be interesting to see if that carries over, or if it was just a one-off. They also brought in Alexander Madison. I was super high on him last year. I honestly thought that he was. I didn't think there was going to be much difference in their running game last year in Minnesota, and I was wrong.
No, Madison did not meet expectations, and
no.
It's very fascinating with what the Raiders are doing because for so long they've had Josh Jacobs as their lead back, and now he's no longer there. You're looking at maybe Zamir White taking a bigger role. Maybe the guy that drafted out of New Hampshire they really, really like are going to give him some minutes.
Well, they have Zamir White as their number one right now,
which makes sense. And here's the thing: Zamir White, who plays a very physical brand of football, will run very hard. He's going to be behind a much better, improved interior offensive line with JPJ there creating holes. So we may actually see an improvement in the running game for the Raiders this year than last year.
Yeah, and then losses. Jimmy G, addition by subtraction maybe. Jerry Tillery, never was a huge fan of his.
Subtraction by addition.
Yeah, addition by subtraction. Josh Jacobs, I like Josh Jacobs, so that's not gonna. And me, I'm a huge Hunter Renfrow fan, so I think that he was so ill-used with the previous regime, and I'm not even going to give that man his flowers on the air. I'm just going to say the previous regime because I think that little of him.
You want to hear my thoughts about the previous regime? Look up 2023 AFC West Preview. I go after him. Did not like him.
You did. On to the two-time defending world champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk about their issue. Wide receiver room on paper doesn't look good. It won't effing matter. That's the thing with the Chiefs. They are going to go out there. Maybe Rashee Rice is going to be suspended. I don't know at this point. We have waited long enough. I figured we'd hear news on that. Nothing yet.
I am shocked about that as well. I can't believe that we haven't heard anything. But we honestly haven't heard very many league suspensions yet this year because there's a couple of them.
Which makes me wonder if they're going to be for 2025 instead. Hollywood Brown, you really like the move. I'm not a Hollywood Brown guy, but he is also hurt. And then we look at their first round pick in Xavier Worthy, who we'll get to in a second. But their lead receiver, it's not plain wide receiver. He plays tight end. That's Travis Kelce. And as long as the Chiefs have Travis Kelce, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, they're set.
Yeah, so I like the Hollywood move because, one, I don't think he's actually played with a quarterback in a scheme that can actually do anything with him. I don't like the player for his attitude, but you can't deny that he has talent. And I just think that the places where he has played before did not utilize his talent for various reasons, whether it was the route tree that you were sticking him in or the fact that the quarterback just couldn't get the ball unless it was just a deep shot, right? So utilize his ability to, he's like a poor man's Tyreek Hill, right? He's quick, he's shifty. He's not nearly as stout, as thick as Tyreek. And that's one of the things, people think that they can arm tackle Tyreek Hill and you just can't do it. Right. And so I don't want to sit there and say that he's going to fill that role, but he's going to walk in those shoes. Right. So I like that because their offense has been missing that for the last couple of years. You're right about everybody else. So it was kind of funny. I'm looking at their cuts for today, and one of the free agent acquisitions, to jump ahead really quick, was I was going to talk about Irv Smith because I thought, oh, that might have been good, and I just see that he was cut today. Yes. So was Kadarius Toney.
Yep, and they actually did bring a Smith in, and Juju Smith-Schuster signed yesterday.
Oh. Okay, well, there you go. Well, and he's got familiarity with the team, so.
Yes. This team, it's just going to be good as long as Pat and Kelce are healthy, they'll be good.
Yeah. So let's move on to the draft. I'm going to let you address their first round draft pick because I know how much you love the Texas wide receivers.
I loved one Texas wide receiver, to be very clear. And it's not Xavier Worthy. I'm sorry. He is a dream receiver with his speed. He can get open, creates good separation. He does all that so well, except he can't catch the football. There is a word that's very important in wide receiver. It's the receiving part. If you can't catch, you can't be a reliable target, and maybe he improves on it. Maybe Pat Mahomes works with him better than Quinn Ewers did in Texas. I don't know. But to say I'm high on the pick would just be wrong because I'm not. I didn't think much of him when I watched his Texas film. I thought he was fast, which he showed at the Combine, but he just didn't do anything else for me. Ironically, you know who he's a good comp for? Kadarius Toney.
I don't think he's as shifty as Kadarius Toney.
No, but can do so much of the things before the ball gets in his hand, but that ball does not stay in his hand.
Yeah. So it's funny. The very next pick in the draft, I would have rather had him for the Chiefs than Xavier Worthy.
I'm trying to remember. It was the 29th pick. Oh, it was Tyler Guyton.
Oh, my bad. I meant the very next wide receiver picked. My apologies.
Yeah. And you are right. Ricky Pearsall Jr. would have probably been better because he's a good catcher, a better route runner than Xavier Worthy. Doesn't have the speed that Worthy does. That is one thing I will not deny about Worthy. He is fast. But outside of his speed, there's not much selling point for me on it. Now, their next pick is a guy I liked a good bit in Kingsley Samortatia. I apologize if I butchered that name. He was a very developmental tackle to me. A guy who has a lot of traits I loved, but needs to be worked with heavily. I thought his best spot was the Packers because the Packers always take those guys and they just work with them so well. But the Chiefs have had a history of working with developmental tackles. They sometimes work out, they sometimes don't, but he will not be required to start early, which is very important.
Yeah, I like him too. So it's kind of funny. I think he's a lot like the tackle that went to the Saints. So far as
Flaga.
his from 2 years ago.
Oh, Trevor Penning.
Yes, thank you. Um, Big, raw bone, strong, has a lot of attitude, gets himself in trouble sometimes. He overcompensates. But I like that in Penning as well. So
Uh,
it's no wonder that I like Kingsley.
as
So
someone who really didn't like Penny, I will say I think Kingsley's hands are far more developed than Penny's was. Uh,
and that's definitely Jared Wiley, tight end of the TCU. Uh, I I did watch the tight end class because I really I was fascinated by a couple of them, and I mean Brock Bowers one off. I don't really consider him a tight end. Uh, I consider him just a big body wide receiver, but I really wasn't. I don't have an opinion one way or the other on Wiley. He had some good plays, but he's just a guy in my opinion.
I am very holding judgment on this pick just because I don't think TCU used him properly. I don't think Sonny Patterson.
Fair enough.
Oh wait, not Sonny Patterson. Sonny Dyke's offense is very well suited for a tight end, and we won't probably see him play a whole bunch unless Kelsey does get hurt, which I hope that we don't see.
Well, they still have Noah Gray though too.
Yeah, and it's going to be hard for him to see the field because he is in a very good tight end room. So it's going to be hard to judge him how he develops and all that. He is in a spot though that he does get to work with some of the best people in the league on offense. Jaden Hicks, this is one of my gems of the class.
Oh, he's a dude. He's a dude.
He, in my opinion, was the most violent player in this draft. You went across the middle. There was a chance you weren't making it back up.
He's a hitter. There's no doubt about it. So I would agree that he is violent, and it's one of the reasons why I love him.
Hunter Norzad, I don't think you can go wrong with the Penn State offensive lineman. Even though I wasn't super high on him, they consistently put guys in the league. They do the right things. They have good hand placement. They have good footwork. It's a good program to draft offensive linemen from. Then we look at Kamal Hayden from Tennessee. I didn't watch too much of him. With what I did see was him going against other SEC wide receivers in the Florida game. And he never really spoke to me. He was someone that I'm like, the draft fell off around pick 200 for me in the talent wise. Can't say I blame them. And I did not watch CJ Hansen at all.
So CJ Hansen looks like he's 40.
Really?
pull up a picture of him on the internet. He looks like he's 40. So he's a prospect, right?
Oh yeah, I have good news for him. He's gonna look the exact same when he turns 40.
Probably, and more power to him. But it's anytime you're taking an offensive lineman in the 6th or 7th round, unless they've got just like tools beyond belief, you're taking them because you think that they can be suitable if you need somebody to step in, right? And I think that's probably him. He wasn't ultra athletic or whatever else, but solid. And so, I mean, that's the important thing.
There's no. Go ahead.
The interesting thing about the Chiefs is they did a lot of signings within their own team, right? So they had a lot of bringing players back that played with them last year. They brought in Carson Wentz as backup quarterback, Marquise Brown, which we already talked about, and Irv Smith, which we already talked about that he's gone too. So, I mean, and really, if you think about it, their losses on defense, Mike Edwards, Willie Gay and L'Jarius Sneed, they have such depth on their defense because of how they've drafted for the last couple of years, and then they continue to draft this year, bringing in Jaden Hicks. Um, I honestly think that their secondary is going to be fine. I really do.
They know what they want, and that's what the best drafting teams in the NFL are. They know what they want. They don't go for these flashy guys necessarily, even though they did take some of those. But when it comes down to day 3, day 2, they have certain targets in mind. They have to check these boxes, and these guys check the boxes.
That is true. So let's. Okay, so I do have to ask this. Do you think that they're a better team this year than they were last year going into the season? They brought in a couple other wide receivers. Yes, they lost L'Jarius Sneed. But going into it last year, we were like, who are they going to throw the ball to? I liked Rashee Rice, but we didn't see we didn't see anything else, right? So do you think they're stronger this year than they were last year? Because I do.
I will say to be determined, because even though I do like how they replaced guys in the secondary, losing L'Jarius Sneed is still a big hiccup. And replace him, I don't think is going to be entirely easy. That being said, do I expect them to be bad in the secondary? No, not necessarily. But I don't expect them to have someone as good as L'Jarius Sneed at cornerback.
So I'm just going to say that was a cop-out, by the way. But that's okay.
Cop-out? Well, I'm not betting against this team. I am being very careful.
All right, so let's go to Defensive Player of the Year.
Rookie.
I'm pretty sure this is going to be chalk for both of us.
Rookie of the Year, correct?
No. I'm Defensive Player of the Year first.
Oh, you want to go rookies last? Okay.
Yeah.
Defensive Player of the Year, I went Max Crosby.
I went Max Crosby as well.
Offense MVP, chalk, which is why I gave 2 names, but they're both chalky. Mahomes and Kelsey.
I'm sorry that it's Offensive Player of the Year, and in this division, the Offensive Player of the Year is Pat Mahomes. Whether you're tired of saying it or not, it is what it is, right? So
he is the best player in football.
So you can't just because you're tired of saying it, that doesn't diminish his greatness, right?
No.
So defensive rookie of the year, and the reason why I've been sticking with this defensive play is because you said we might have a disagreement on the offensive. So defensive rookie of the year, I have Junior Colson.
Same. This draft, teams didn't really take a defensive player early, and it kind of let me look at, okay, who was the best? And Colson he fit the criteria as I wanted. Someone who I think will start early, will know the defense, will fit well in the scheme. I think
he's going to get a lot of tackles.
Yes, he ticks all the boxes.
I'm going to let you go with your offensive rookie of the year first. You said that you think we're going to have disagreement. So it's going to be interesting to say or to hear what you have to say.
Okay. My prediction is I believe you took Brock Bowers. I did not.
I did not.
Oh, wow. Then maybe we do agree. I took Ladd McConkey.
That's my boy.
He is in a receiving room with no one else. The Chargers have the worst receiving room in the NFL. And that's coming from a Steelers fan who's been complaining about the receiver room all offseason. He is the only guy you can trust on to catch the football, that can get open, that can create separation, that can probably score you touchdowns. Like, Ladd makes so much sense to just be this breakout player this year, be the rookie that wasn't drafted round 1, that everyone's like, how did he go round 2? Well, the answer is Georgia just didn't give him the ball enough, and Harbaugh saw that probably. He was like, I would like a Ladd McConkey on my team. Let's go draft Ladd McConkey.
I couldn't agree more. But yes, coming out, I literally had him rated as my 3rd wide receiver.
Yeah, and Georgia fans, hey, you can't be mad at us not picking Brock Bowers. We took another Bulldog.
Besides that, I don't think Brock Bowers is a tight end. So,
yeah. Division standings, I think these are probably going to be very chalk for us. I don't think we're going to have any disagreements. Not saying they won't end up differently, but this is kind of where I ended up at. I have a feeling we have the same opinion. I have the Broncos in last place.
I do as well.
I had the Chargers in third place.
Good God, we are chalk.
Raiders in second, Chiefs in first.
Yes. All right, so it's 8:27. We have football starting in a week and in 2 days.
In 8 days.
Yes. Are we going to get together for an overall pick'em session?
I think we will do a NFL pick'ems as we predict the MVP, the Offense Player of the Year, which is quarterback banned. You are not allowed to take quarterback for that. Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year for both offense and defense, Super Bowl picks, and who is the eventual Super Bowl champion.
Fair enough. So just so everybody remembers, last year, we weren't close.
No, I was very close with one team. I had Jaguars-Lions. One didn't make the playoffs. One was right on the doorstep.
Very true.
Yours got, they didn't end well.
Derailed.
So, can we just warn everyone, who he picks for his AFC Super Bowl, be worried.
Your quarterback is done.
He picked the Colts a couple years ago, and then he picked the Bengals last year. Quarterbacks, be warned.
Yes. I am like the Antichrist for quarterbacks in the AFC when I pick you to go to the Super Bowl.
But that's going to wrap us up. We talked a lot about this division. There are some positives, some negatives. This will be a fascinating division to see how 2 through 4 ends up. We all pretty much agree who one's going to be at the end. But that's going to wrap us up for divisional
Just remember,
previews.
football is 8 days away, guys.
Yep. Let's wrap us up for our divisional previews. If you want to check out any of the other ones, because it's the final one, the playlist will be showing up right about now. And if you want to check out the most recent video, which is going to be a college football podcast, check that one on the other side. In the middle is a subscribe button. If you're new to the channel, I'd very much appreciate it. And if you disagree with us, go down in the comment section. Tell us how stupid we are. We don't mind.